As far as native tools, that was a tool we were really telling engineers that were building in those accounts and subscriptions to be using. But we always phrase that as go use the native tools to look at your usage and investigate, anomalies and drill into things. We didn't take the native tools as dollar value because there was so much kind of shifting and allocation that was happening that it was never the final chargeback, but use it as a usage tool. So that was pretty common for our engineers to be in pretty regularly.
We take that and we drive it even further back down and get into our senior leadership team, right? And we create a leaderboard of senior leaders. I've just got it blacked out there, just at the names and stuff like that. But what that shows us is we create this wall of fame, as opposed to, traditionally you create a leaderboard and you're trying to shame the guys at the bottom to get to the top. What we actually try to do here is to show the success that is being done by our engineers, how they are making things better with the information we're able to get to them, right? So as we matured our practice, we want to do more with all the data that these different tools can give us. So we would try and pull this data out and make it back visible to people.
The other area this assessment could come into play is going back to the story I said earlier. Maybe you're really good at doing FinOps for one cloud provider, but you actually want to do it for another cloud provider. And so you could be assessing how your organization has adopted the FinOps practice and your maturity across two cloud providers as well. Those are just a couple of examples. I'm sure you all could think of other ways that you would use this assessment.
So starting with the ecosystem vision, at the center of this vision, you see application and product focus. So what does this mean? It actually means that in most conversations today, people use the cloud provider terms like subscription, project, or account when they talk about the cloud. And in reality, in our business, people both on the engineering and business side understand much more the internal products and applications. So we said this should be actually the first-class citizen of our tooling. This should be the main dimension we slice and dice the data on, or we access from the menu.
This is what a normalized or a tidy data set for multi-cloud billing would look like. The beauty of this format is that it scales up and down pretty seamlessly. So if you want to know what your static IP costs are, for example, in AWS, you would just add a dimension, as I alluded to earlier, and you can make this data as rich or as zoomed out as you want.
In the future, this is what we think this is going to look like, where many vendors will lean in, the providers will lean in and produce the data in focus specification. If you're a brand new provider, you're probably just going to adopt this specification rather than try to create yet another proprietary way of providing the billing data. If you're an existing vendor, you're probably looking to incorporate this into your billing data and cost management capabilities today.
I'm J.R. Stormont. For those of you who don't know me, I lead up the FinOps Foundation as Executive Director. This morning, we're going to cover, or afternoon for some of you, a lot. We've got 120 minutes of content for you. We're going to talk about things happening in the community and the why of what we do. We're going to get a lot of presentations from the community around how to use data, how scorecarding works, deep dives into things like focus, and look at some of the working group outputs on the back of that. However, before we get started, I do want to share with you, and I'm going to restart the screen share one more time because I didn't include sound when I did it. I want to share with you a quick video to set the mood of an event that we did in Europe earlier last month. To give a sense for where the community is going. Can you see the screen again? Perfect. Here we go. All right. So thanks to all those who attended that event. As an introduction, as people come in, I wanted to share a little bit about who the FinOps Foundation is before we get into all the content. We are a 501c6 US-based nonprofit, part of the Linux Foundation, focused on advancing all of you, the people who do the work of managing the value of cloud. A lot of you have seen this, and we're going to dig into all these areas, obviously, as we get into the content today, but we're really focused around three areas. First and foremost, community, right? How do we help build connections between all of you who are doing this work? Second, education, training, career advancement. And third, empowering best practices, frameworks, specifications, and standards. Now, before we get started, I'm going to do something I didn't really tell the team about, and probably something that I shouldn't do on a business call typically, but you know, we're a nonprofit, we get to play around. I'm actually going to read you an excerpt from a poem. All right, the poem is called Second Life by David White, and it starts like this. My uncourageous life doesn't want to go, doesn't want to speak, doesn't want to carry on, wants to make its way through stealth, wants to assume the strange and dubious honor of not being heard. I wanted to highlight this poem. It's a very long poem. It goes on a long ways. You can look it up. Because for me, as I was reflecting this morning, I get up really early for these summits on the critical moments in my own career journey. They almost always came at some unexpected time when I kind of had to pull myself out of the door to show up somewhere and be heard, or have a conversation, or go to a meeting that I didn't really always want to go to. These seemingly like little tiny decisions that didn't really seem like they had a lot of consequence at the time, but completely influenced my path in life. I'll stop the screen share here so I can actually talk to you all a bit. You know, great examples of that for me were, you know, personally, in 2008, decided to go audition for a musical production where I met my wife of 14 years. In 2008, I ended up not really wanting to go to this event where I was speaking about a failed startup that I had done. And at that event, I met my future co-founder of a company that I spent 9 years in, and that ultimately led to the work doing here in the FinOps Foundation. Co-author of the book, Mike Fuller, met him in Australia in 2014 because I went down to an event there, and he opened up to me in his office about how he thought everything I knew about reserved instances was wrong. And later, we decided to work together while at a baseball game in Boston, completely randomly. Rob Martin, who is on our team, decided a couple of years ago to leave his job at a Fortune 1 cloud provider to come join this tiny little startup that we have. It's a nonprofit of 2 people at the time to talk about how we advance the careers of people. And over, as I was thinking about how those times in my career when I got out the door and I went and had conversations and I showed up, that things changed. And, you know, we've all spent hours. I mean, I used to live in London for a couple of years, and I would spend literally days in conference rooms talking about business and cloud and all these things. And that's not where I formed the connections. The connections I formed were during the time that I was walking to the elevator, catching up on small talk, or while I was standing in the coffee line, waiting for my cappuccino to be ready. And I'm talking to the folks about their kids or what they like to do on the weekends. That's where the connections, that's where the business really was done, because that's where the humans got together. And the theme that I reflected on as I was looking through this morning was that often when I showed up, I didn't really feel like I wanted to show up. Now, during COVID, showing up was easy, right? We kind of threw on pajamas. Well, at least I had to have a shirt on. You know, some people wore pajamas on the bottom, brush teeth, brush hair, all the things. We tried to eke out connections over Zoom calls. I actually quit my my last official corporate job the day that COVID was announced because I didn't want to spend hours and hours and hours on Zoom calls. Now, ironically, I ended up spending hours and hours of Zoom calls anyway, because that's the way the world went. But getting back to the content here, you know, during COVID, what we saw was this really big growth in this FinOps community. And the FinOps community flourished because we were able to bring together hundreds or thousands of people like you. We've got 770 right now. It's slowly going up, who are facing similar challenges, right? We all wanted to come together on summits and conversations to talk about how we can integrate our practices, advance our careers, get better. Thank you for everybody who's been a part of that and for doing it in that integrated, non-pitchy, human way. Not just vendors being not pitchy, but also practitioners, because we can come to these events and just really be here to look for our next job or to hire our next person or to advance our careers. But the real magic has come when people have come to genuinely sort of share their experience, help each other out, and be a part of the community in a genuine, authentic way. So I'm going to break one of the core rules of the FinOps Foundation Code of Conduct, and I hope you'll forgive me, which is I'm going to make a pitch. Someone can report me to the Code of Conduct Committee if we want. We can go through the evaluation. I'm considering this pitch okay because no one on our team makes any more money if you take us up on the pitch. Really only you and the community end up benefiting. The pitch is pretty simple. The pitch is come to some of the in-person events that are happening. Meet your peers. Have that like coffee or beer or water or wine or whatever it is you drink with them. The connections you're going to make at those events in person are really going to shape and influence your career. They have for me considerably. You know, and if you're like me, you probably spend more time with your colleagues than you do your family. And it's important to develop those relationships because if you're going to spend that much time, they might as well be meaningful. So we as the FinOps Foundation are investing really heavily right now, time, energy, money. Thank you to the governing board for enabling and making this possible to get people together in various formats, in various locations. We think this is one of the best ways to advance the industry, to advance our mission. Tonight, as an example of that, there's actually a roadshow event happening in New York City. We've got Vaz and Joe and Rob from our team are going to be there. And we've got 100 folks from the New York City and surrounding areas coming in to talk FinOps, to have some food, to have a conversation. We're doing this all over the world right now. We just did Chicago. We just did Sydney. We've got Stockholm coming up. We've got Paris. We're going to do Tel Aviv later in the year. There's probably a city near you where this is happening. We did the community event in Amsterdam. I showed the video at the beginning earlier. Now, the big one that's coming up, though, that you've all heard about is FinOps X. And I've been struggling. I spent the last couple of days reaching out to all the people working on this to be like, how do I explain how great this is going to be in terms of what you're going to get out of it? And I've been to the AWS reInvent conference like 9 times. First went in 2013, kind of blew my mind at that point, early cloud days. What was crazy about it, and what I think we're developing here as well with this community and at this event, is a small but focused community of like really amazing people who are all doing similar things, right? Where you can turn to anybody in the coffee line at this type of event, and they're going to understand what you do. You don't have to have that conversation of what FinOps, what is that? Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Now this is about how do we actually engage on a deeper level in these things. So one of the things that I've been trying to highlight, thank you, Steve Trask, for throwing this slide together for me this morning, 5:30 in my time, was all the breadth of things that are happening here and the ways that you can all connect. In addition to all the dozens and dozens and dozens of speaking content sessions, all those things, there's going to be nonstop opportunities to meet people in real life, in various chat spaces. There's an 8,000 square foot terrace overlooking the bay. If you don't want to go to content, I was talking to Dieter Mason, FinOps legend, yesterday. He's coming down. He wants to sit and just talk to people and have conversations. He's going to be camped out on the terrace. There's chalk talks, there's breakfast sessions, there's award ceremonies. We're going to have an award ceremony at an aircraft carrier at sunset. There's going to be so many opportunities to interact. Yes, it's far away. Yes, it's in San Diego, which is not a bad place, by the way. I know travel is a pain in the ass, but the experience that you're going to have is going to be worth it. You go down there, if you go out the door and spend time with the people around you, your career will be advanced. Pretty confident your network's going to be advanced, and eyes will be open to new concepts. So, going to get out of my wishy-washy pitch here with the end of this poem. You're going to have to humor me for another minute because the first part of the poem was about not leaving the house, and this is about the part of your life that does. The first courageous life, in fact, has already gone ahead, has nowhere to go but out the door into the clear air of morning, taking me with it. Nothing to do except to breathe while I can. No way to travel, but with that familiar pilgrim movement. Nothing to teach except to show me on the long road how we sometimes like to walk alone, open to the silent revelation. And then, this is the part we're going to do, stop and gather and share everything as dark comes in, telling the story of a day's accidental beauty. So at the event, you're going to see your future peers, your colleagues, maybe your future boss, somebody you might want to hire, your future friends. I want you to be there. I want you to join in that conversation. It's going to cost some money to get there. If you can't afford to come, if you really can't afford to come, reach out to us and we'll see what we can figure out. There's a lot of organizations who are trying to sponsor people. However, if you're like the majority of North American, at least, or European FinOps practitioners, we pulled the data where they're making north of $100,000 a year, you really can't afford for your career not to show up at these type of events. If X is too big and far, fine. Go to the road shows, go to the meetups, talk to people, have those connections. That type of investment in your career is gonna make a big impact. And yes, it's a pitch, and I super apologize, but I'm doing it because I really believe in it. And I think that you guys will be very, very happy that you made the choice. So please come share some of that accidental beauty with your peers and colleagues and advance your career. Okay, I hope that wasn't too much. That was very nerve-wracking for me to do the monologue. So with that, let me pass to the people that you came here to hear from, which is those talking about the data that we're going to be sharing from State of FinOps and the actual content from the production. Steve Trask, Hromatko, ready to take over?
Thanks, JR. That's a pretty hard act to follow, I've got to say. So welcome, everyone. Thanks very much. So we've continued to kind of dig into the data of the State of FinOps, and thank you to everyone who's taken it. It's still open, so we still are collecting data, and we will continue to do so. And we'll continue to provide updates where we can and provide data to working groups and integrate that data to the community to further the cause. So we've continued to dig into the data, and we've pulled some interesting data around the teams, hoping to understand kind of when organizations have dedicated FinOps person or teams. So an interesting aspect is teams don't really start until they've got material spend happening. Those who are spending less than 1 million a year typically do not have a dedicated person. And the responsibility really goes on the kind of engineering, DevOps, or IT, we found. So it's not until the spend really increases that then the team starts to develop. So the size of the dedicated team is in comparison with the spend, which is also kind of normally a sign of complexity as well. So if we kind of looked at the spend versus the team size, it really has that correlation of how it kind of grows. It's also worth pointing out that teams could be made up of different ways. You know, on a recent virtual summit, I'm trying to remember the month, but we also dug into kind of contractors and consultants and how they kind of are in the mix within that team because they are dedicated resources within it. You can obviously check those previous recordings out on our YouTube or, you know, on data.finops.org where we hold all the details as well.
And this is really interesting. We pulled this because I think there's sometimes a conversation around ROI within FinOps and when it makes sense to actually invest into it as a dedicated team. And I want to highlight there really is a turning point, right? And we found that in the data very much at this dollar figure, where if you're newer in cloud and spending less, you probably don't actually need it. And the key thing, just double click, and sorry if I'm repeating, Steve, but is that, you know, in the beginning, it is a responsibility that should fall within typically engineering operation teams, right? It's not until you hit that larger scale where you've got to start building out the dedicated team to grow that.
Yeah, and it's maybe we should get some real world experience there from Ashley, who, from your experience of running a FinOps team at Pearson, when would you look at increasing your team, and what are the indicators that for you would trigger that kind of growth?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I started our FinOps team, it was just me and one other person. And quickly, in about 4 years, we spun up to having 11 full-time people working on a dedicated centralized FinOps team. And there was a lot of things that came into play. We were moving off of the data centers very quickly. And so I had a certain dollar amount that I learned over time. Once I hit that per month, we really needed another, what I called a FinOps analyst, because one thing I really wanted is our analysts to know the products like the back of their hand. Like I wanted them to know which products in that business line were going to have upward spend and downward spend. And when you start adding more spend to the cloud monthly, you inherently increase the BAU activities that are happening, more anomaly alerts, more budget follow-ups, more reservations that need to be purchased. And so I always had that number. And when we got there, I would say, okay, how's everyone feeling? Let's do a check-in. Are we feeling too thread thin? And then we would make a call if we're going to hire someone else. There would also be special projects. So I'd often bring in like an intern to work on like a special project that I just needed to get moved forward. And we didn't have a lot of full-time staff to work on those. I'd also borrow from teams. So maybe there's a project that I wanted to automate, or maybe there was something we wanted to streamline into like our Slack or our Jiras. And so I didn't need someone full-time doing it, but I need someone to execute the project and know that they could continue to work on the project if we had other enhancements come. A lot of people augment too with like contractors. There was a couple instances where we really leaned into our cloud provider that provided some type of service, specifically when we were trying to build like a data lake. So where are those like special skill sets, like maybe a data scientist that you need, and might not be able to keep them on, you know, full time, but you can contract them for a year to get something up and running. The other thing I was facing as I was leaving is we were doing FinOps really well in one cloud, and we wanted to expand to multi-cloud. So I was having to make a decision, like, can I take current FinOps staff and train them on a new cloud services, new cloud billing, or should I hire someone that knows that cloud provider really well and train them on FinOps? So I think there's the projects that you want to be doing, but keeping up with the BAU, and you have to kind of take that all into consideration. And then there's the complexity of your organization as well.
Steve, there was a question in the chat, I don't know if you saw, that was about, is that $1 million per year or $1 million per month?
Per year.
Per year, okay, thank you.
Per year. I was also going to try, I wasn't going to put Ashley on the spot saying, what was that dollar figure when you knew that you had to add a person?
Yeah, I'll say it was about 15 million is when every time we went up another 15 million, it was a month. It was a conversation of where we needed some more help.
Wow, cool. The multi-cloud aspect actually kind of ties into our next slide, which we really want to kind of pivot towards tooling. I know this is the topic of the summit, really. So average tools was 3.7 last year in the data. It's gone up to 4.1, and we saw kind of like some patterns. You know, naturally we kind of align around those, where there was native tools where 97% of people were using native tools. There's platforms which cover a range of features and capabilities. 65% of people are using those observability tools to get those kind of extra metrics and things. 26% of the respondents were using those. And then the specialist tools, which would like dive deep on a specific capability or feature, 16% are using those. One of the people were using multiple combinations of these. So it's kind of native tools and a specialist tool, or native tools. The most common was the native tools and the platforms, which is around 38%. Also, there was the kind of two areas, I think, Ashley, you pointed out there, was that the high usage in tooling was when people are kind of multi-cloud. It showed kind of like people, you know, using multiple native tools, you know, requiring additional tools to kind of service that. But also when that cloud spend kind of was increased, when they're higher cloud spenders, they were having to kind of increase that formula and adding more tools to that mix, typically aligned with, you know, would say complexity. So back to you, Ashley, so kind of what combination were you using out of these at Pearson's, and how were you using them, and kind of like other specific use cases?
Yeah, using at least one tool in each category. So as far as native tools, you know, that was the tool we were really telling engineers that were building in those accounts and subscriptions to be using. But we always like phrase that as like, go use the native tools to look at your usage and investigate, you know, anomalies and drill into things. We didn't take the native tools as dollar value because there was so much kind of shifting and allocation that was happening that it was never the final chargeback, but use it as a usage tool. So that was pretty common for our engineers to be in pretty regularly. And then we would use a third-party platform tool because it aggregated views up. So we would have like a product owner that maybe has multiple products, or an SRE pod lead that needs to look at several applications. Even our VP of infrastructure, they have a different view and a different funnel of how they want to see data. And so those third-party platforms are really helpful with that. Again, coming from a very complex organization, we didn't just have one observability tool. Depending on the business unit, they might have procured their own observability. So we had an insights team that aggregated that data from those different observability tools into a view. Next to that view was also FinOps data. And then a lot of specialty tools was used as well. So early days, we did use a specialty tool to manage our commits, and then we moved that a little bit in-house. We use tools like Power BI and Tableau. Specifically, Tableau was like the view that our C-suite and executives really were familiar with looking at. The key with that is that we could always drill down further into those. And then even using like kind of security tools, which you wouldn't maybe think about that inherently, but like they were doing, you know, specific policies, and we could also add on FinOps policies and kind of see dashboards through those security tools too. So we were using probably at least one in each of those categories.
A couple of questions, actually, and see a couple of questions that came in there while you were talking. One of the ones was, did we see correlation between tool and maturity? And I'm not sure if you maybe have that later coming up.
No, we don't. We have, as in specific tools.
Tool types, like what types of things you're using. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like more mature, the higher spenders. Typically, it would be kind of like across all four, where you would have the kind of the native tools, the platforms. There was observability. I suspect that, you know, thinking on to what Ashley's saying, is they're not directly procuring observability tools, it just happens the organization of a scale and a size where they have access to the observability tool and they're just utilizing it in the FinOps team. So then the kind of like the most common is native and platform, but you know, the larger spenders and more mature folks are kind of going across these 4 categories. And it'd be really interesting next year to start really tracking this about how these combinations work and how they are increasing and those trends. And there's definitely some interesting questions in the Slack, in the chat. And yeah, it's kind of like finding the right tool, I think, because it's, you know, there's more tools, people are using more tools and there's more tools available. And I think that's just finding what tools do what. I think these categories will really help and understanding that. And I know the team at the foundation is trying to figure out a way to kind of help the community understand and link into those tools. And, you know, FinOps is definitely a must attend if you're interested in that area as well.
Yeah, so, as much as like the FinOps landscaping tools are scaling and covering more capabilities and domains, you also are seeing a vast amount of movement in securities and observability tools right now as well. So always kind of looking into what are the new features that they have. I had this conversation with someone else, is like, look at what you currently have for your toolscape and then see what your gaps are. And then even if you're using something, like the landscape is changing so quickly. So like as a FinOps manager or even observability manager, security manager, you should always be out there looking at demos, looking at other tools and seeing what type of capabilities are being built into these tools, because it's just rapidly growing so fast.
Yeah, the evolution is very quick in this space. It's definitely, as JR pointed out, the growth in the community, the growth in the space is fueling that. So we wanted to kind of look at kind of all tool usage types. So we have kind of like, when we asked the survey, we asked like, is this your primary tool? Is this used occasionally? Is this used frequently? Also, there's multiple, as I said, there's multiple native tools. So first of all, we wanted to kind of like group the usage to show usage. Again, this data is just for this year. It's obviously can change from the respondents to last year. So it's just I would say an indicator of that. If you move on to the next slide, JR, we can kind of cover that quickly. And then we want to kind of dig into that usage as well. So as you can see, the native tools are primarily used the most, as in all usage types. And this is answers with 5+ respondents having, 5+ respondents of a primary tool. And also practitioners spending $1 million annual cloud spend per year. And then you kind of like have the homegrown tool, and then you got the platforms and kind of observability kind of coming in there, and then kind of long tail coming off there. But we really wanted to kind of like dig into the next level. So going into the next level on this slide, this kind of splits out how people are using these tools. So we have the primary kind of tool. This is again ranked by that total usage. We have the primary tool usage in green, and then we've got use occasionally, and then kind of the use frequently, and then have tried but don't use in orange. As you can see, the kind of cloud native tools are kind of like more used occasionally and frequently, whereas actually the #1 ranking primary tool this year was a homegrown tool. It was, from my memory, 2 years ago was about number 5, number 6. It was number 2 last year, and it's kind of crept up to kind of #1, just sneaking into #1 this year. So it's interesting that change. It's really prompting us to think about what is a homegrown tool, and especially in the combination slide, it's expected to align and be supplemented with other tools as well. Actually, what's your perspectives based on your experience and what you're seeing, in the industry, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to slow down. I'm sorry, y'all. I am a fast talker, and especially when I get excited. So I will slow myself down. Just looking back like 2 years ago, I think a lot of folks were looking at the cloud native tools, and it had a little bit of things, but it didn't have the whole full suite of what we would say is like capabilities like budgets, anomaly detections, and forecasting. I have to give a huge shout out to CSPs. They've come a long way in the last couple of years. Not only are they like putting out more features, but they're actually looking at what they currently have and iterating on that. I'm going to maybe give some unbiasedness that I think the foundation has helped with that too, because there's many of us talking about what we would like to see from a forecasting tool. And I think they're listening. And so we've been seeing a lot of changes in this space, which is incredible. This kind of goes back to what I said before of like, I remember one day we launched an anomaly workflow tool, spent like months on how we were going to integrate this into the processes across the organization. And I'm talking thousands of engineers. And it was like that same week, one of the cloud providers released their own anomaly feature. And so when we talk about return on investment, like you do have to then sit back and say, okay, we put all this time and this energy of releasing this one workflow with this tool. Is it time to pivot now? If we decide to pivot to something, what is going to be the impact to the organization? So you're always kind of thinking of those trade-offs, but I'm not surprised to see the CSPs have gained ground over the last couple of years. If you follow any of their blogs, you'll constantly see new things being put out. I would also say if you aren't following the tools-new features vendor Slack channel, I love that channel. Every time I see one of our partners put something out, I instantly go to the page and read what the new feature is that they've launched and see how it ties back to capabilities. And so we're seeing the same thing on a lot of the third-party tools as well. I think yeah, so I was just say, even with the CSPs though, you're always going to have that multi-cloud gap that you have to figure out how to close, which is a little bit difficult just using a single CSP provider.
I'd just point out, with those who have access to Slack in the community, that is an opt-in channel. So we don't automatically add people to that channel. It's an opt-in because it is a lot of tooling providers kind of pushing new features and giving it exposure to that. So we will put that in announcements or share that in the chat here as well. So make sure you can kind of join that. But it is fascinating. We'll put in the kind of like the cloud providers. I think Google sent me the other day kind of like the latest releases and their kind of feature releases, and it's a whole page of kind of all they're working on. But yeah, excited what's going to happen in the next year as well. So yeah, it's definitely changing the landscape.
One of the questions that came through, I think this also relates to that native aspect, was about what about folks spending less than $1 million a year? And I know we don't have a slide for that, but do you remember anecdotally what that data looked like? Was it a lot more native tools, I'm guessing, or? I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't like to guess on that one without kind of looking at the data, but I suspect it would be a lot of native tools, because the ROI question wouldn't particularly work out unless it was I would suspect the tool that was already being used elsewhere or is, makes sense on an ROI basis. But I'm happy to kind of dig into that and kind of actually come back on that as well. Cool. As always, this data is going to be pushed up to data.finops.org. Sam Benson, our web developer, is taking some well-deserved time off today. So it's probably going to be kind of like tomorrow, early next week, this will go up there. And you can always check on the latest updates that are coming out of the data. Again, the survey is still open. And we're going to continuously kind of like add this to kind of areas, and we're getting a lot of requests from the community. It's fantastic to see. We take down these chats and then we kind of get that data and then we can push it on there for what people are looking for. So we're continuously kind of adding charts as we go. Steve, thank you for the pulling out of the data from the insights and carrying this forward, and Ashley, as always, sharing so many great real-world insights to give this all color and context. So yeah, as Steve mentioned, the data.finops.org is what you're seeing on the screen here, kind of constantly evolving and also being integrated into the FinOps framework. So now when you go to look at a capability like forecasting, you can see how people are actually tracking the KPIs there or how they're doing against budget and those types of things. So please do take this survey if you haven't already, so we can continue to enrich the data over time. So I mentioned this earlier, a lot of global events happening. You don't just have to come to the giant ones. These roadshows are free events happening in key cities. Somebody from the team could be so kind as to post a link into where you can get these. Some of these have happened. There's a lot more coming. A great way to have more of these conversations in person in your regional area. Wanted to also give a big thank you to all the vendors who participate in the right ways in this community. We have coming up on 100 different vendor partner members in the FinOps Foundation community now, ranging from cloud providers to platform providers to consultants and GSIs. All of these have come in, agreed to, both help support the foundation in terms of making these events possible. But a key part of this is them contributing best practices, contributing knowledge. There's so much knowledge at these organizations that they come in and help with working groups, with outputting standards, with outputting ways that they're hearing the community actually do this. So thank you to all of you for making the foundation's work possible. A number of these folks are also on the FinOps Foundation governing board, and this is the group that drives the strategy for the foundation and figures out how we want to grow the community. It's set up to be a mix of practitioners. We got folks from Fidelity, Chevron, Apple, HSBC, platforms, all the major platform providers in the space, clouds, Google, Microsoft, more coming there as well. So this group is coming together actually next month to work on some changes around how we can improve community experience, open up additional events, look at ways that we can actually further things like the focus billing standard that's coming up shortly. You're going to hear about, and they will, of course, also be meeting at FinOps X at a private session as well. As part of that, I wanted to welcome one of our newest vendor member partners, Zeba Khan and Ravi Gupta from EY, who have just joined the foundation as a premier vendor member partner. And each time we do one of these summits, we do one of these as sort of brought to you by one of these new partners. This is an opportunity for you to get to know them, a little bit about them. They're just going to give a couple-minute intro to themselves and the work they're doing there before we continue on. Zeba, Ravi, are you available?
Yes, I'm on. Thanks, JR, for the intro. And really excited to be part of this community. Just a quick introduction of myself. I help lead our FinOps offering for the Financial Services Office and have been doing quite a bit of work in this space. All of my 15 plus years of experience has been in the software engineering space. So just performance engineering, cost optimization has always been very, very close to heart, and really looking forward to contributing back and even learning as we work towards the common objectives and common challenges that we see today with with talking to the CIO, CTO organizations that we work with quite a bit in how well to understand these meaningful insights around finance and understanding bills and how to really action on them. So it's been really wonderful to being able to participate virtually and in person as well, and really looking forward to our contributions as well going forward. I know Ravi had to drop because we just had he had a conflict at right at the 8:30 here, but he's essentially our executive supporting the offering and again leading many conversations day in and day out with our clients and how we could solve these problems creatively. So looking forward to connecting with a lot of you, and I will be in person at the roadshow later tonight. So looking forward to some in-person conversations there as well.
Great, the one in New York City. Nice.
Yes.
There it goes. Zeba, don't put you on the spot because I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but what sort of best practice areas or working groups are you planning to plug into?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we've been doing quite a bit of work in the unit economics space especially with our data and analytics group as well as our business consulting groups. We really look forward to contributing back there as well and working to see how we best evolve. There's two other areas that we also have been focusing from the EY perspective, as one of our focus around sustainability being as an organization. So really bringing that back and finding that connection with the FinOps and how we could really progress the agenda there. And I think the third one that was really of interest was around metrics, sort of defining what does success look like? How do we really measure? And to my comment about meaningful insights into how do I really progress the FinOps function, as well as how do I really optimize my spend on cloud as well. So those are going to be some of the areas of focus for us to work on.
Great. Looking forward to working with you. Thanks for being a part of the community. The other side of the coin to the governing board is the Technical Advisory Council. This is a group that is also designed, and this one is locked into a certain size to keep a very specific balance, practitioners, clouds, platforms, to basically vet and sign off on standards, specifications, and best practices that the FinOps Foundation puts out. Some great folks in here, and there's a few of the seats that are actually turning over. It's a 2-year term, and the Technical Advisory Council is actually to look at a few more seats. So Ashley, do you mind taking a minute and tell us about the upcoming elections and how people can get involved in this group if they want as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Dara said, there's a couple seats that are coming up. They are 2-year terms. And so we have actually the election is open right now. What that means is we're collecting nomination forms. So if you're interested, just go ahead and reach out to me. You can do Ashley@finops.org, or you can find me on Slack. What I'll do is I'll provide you with a sheet. You fill out the first proportion, which is just a little bit about yourself. And then you do have to collect some endorsements from community members. You'll send that in to me, and then we will end up holding those elections the week of May 13th. And if you get elected, I'll notify you and onboard you. And if you don't, we hold these elections about every 6 months. Some of the things that you do when you're sitting on the TAC is that you do attend a monthly meeting. We typically are going over, the foundation output, what we're working on, or different programs. There's sometimes some voting initiatives that have to happen. And then a lot of our working group leads and liaisons come to those and provide updates. And before anything gets published on FinOps.org, that is reviewed by the TAC.
So it's a really important group in the community, and definitely looking for those with lots of experience. Could be across the board, right? Could be in a tech unicorn, could be in big enterprise, could be in government, but those who can really roll up sleeves and feedback on what goes into the standards and best practices we put out. We've got a great set of folks. Some of these are also represented on the TAC as part of our enterprise end user member program. These are organizations that are leaning heavily into FinOps, into the FinOps Foundation, and certifying a lot of folks in their organizations as well. And we've actually asked one of them from Fidelity to share today a bit about how they're doing scorecarding and using some of those KPIs and metrics to measure internally how different groups are doing. So definitely want to welcome Zach Stitham, who sits on our governing board, and then Noel Crowley, who also is in one of those technical advisory council seats that we mentioned, to share a bit about what they're doing there. Zach, Noel?
Thanks, JR. First off, apologies. Zach got pulled away last minute, so isn't going to be here today. So unfortunately, you're stuck with my voice through this. So apologies for that. So I wanted to talk today about the Fidelity's cloud journey. First of all, for anyone who's never heard of Fidelity, we're a financial services company, privately owned by the Johnson family. We predominantly do personal investment, stock plan services, and 401ks. We do those, I think, pretty well. And we've been doing those in our entirety. For the last 17 years, though, that I've been with Fidelity, I've always felt we were more of a technology company. And even to quote our former chairman, we're a technology company that does financial services. In 2016, we started our journey to the cloud. We deployed our first application out there. We launched our technology strategy to be a multi-cloud environment, as well as planning to have 70% of our applications in the public cloud by the end of 2024. Zach and myself, we work for centralized IT, and as part of that, the Enterprise Cloud Computing Business Unit, we hold ourselves to 3 pillars: to safely and securely adopt the cloud at scale, to do no harm to our brand, and to adopt the cloud in a cost-effective manner. So as we started to migrate to the cloud, the next slide there, please, we created our Fidelity FinOps focus, right? For us and for FinOps, we started to migrate and we created our FinOps practice. Collectively, we took responsibility for achieving a value for our cloud spend, right? As I said earlier there, about adopting the cloud in a cost-effective manner. So when we created these focus areas for ourselves, we wanted to have cross-transparency to make our costs visible, financial controls, have checks and balances between technology and financial orgs, have purchasing strategies, so we had a centralized FinOps team, IT optimization around automation for developers or engineers, improve the utilization when they were using compute, and most importantly, to get the best value for every dollar we spent in the cloud. But ultimately, at all this, we wanted to create a culture of accountability. So we had to kind of look at what tooling and what information, how we get that out there for people around dashboards and KPIs and stuff like that. So with that, we created our intranet, our first intranet. So the next slide there, please. We created our intranet, our highway to the cloud, as we call it internally here. This is a first port of call for all technologists, for everybody in Fidelity, as they start their cloud journey. It provides the information on the different cloud service provider platforms and products, and it makes it easy for application teams to deploy their workloads to the cloud. So information there for FinOps predominantly, as well as everything else that we provide from central IT. So we've got governance and networking and everything else. It's just an internal site to get information out there. When we have this site, then we start to transition them out there to native tooling from our providers. So both depending if they want to utilize, depending on if they're going to have their application to be born in the cloud out there, or if they're going to migrate an existing application out there, depending on which provider they use. They may be using the AWS cost management and trusted advisor tools. They may be they'd be encouraged to use that if they're using predominantly AWS applications. It's out of the box. It's day one information that gets them there, and it gets them an understanding of their costs. Sorry, next slide again, please. As well as that, then there's also the Azure cost management and advisor tool. These are there, as I say, these are tools that are native straight away for people to use with documentation, how to use them and understanding on them. Could you go on again, please, JR? And then, so as I said, we have these tools out there to get the visibility for users, to developers and everything else to get out there and get their information. As well as that, we then had the decision to make to go, do we develop, or do we go and use a third-party tool to get really into the nitty-gritty and the details of the spend? At the time, we decided we would use a vendor tool. It gives us great visibility into our costs by business unit, by account, by environment. As I said, we're a multi-cloud provider organization, so this gives us just basically a single pane of glass to get that data of the spend out to our application development teams. We have an extremely good tagging policy in place, so we can basically get the cost right back to the penny for these teams using these third-party tools, and it saved us having to go initially to develop that. Right, it helps us to make the information and the views that we present to people, it's actionable to them. It's exactly what they're doing, and helps them to understand how they're spending it. But sometimes with these, like, we kind of went that there's not one tool that does everything for everybody. So we have also gone and we've developed tools ourselves, as well as dashboards. We have tools like Notifier, as we call it, which basically is an in-house tool that we have developed that pulls data from our various different tools, that applications and stuff that we're using, and it sends the information via email or instant message to the person who can take an appropriate action and that is useful to them. As I say, as shown here, we also have our KPIs, which we use to bubble up our information, but to a business unit level. And this helps us this helps us with the information and making it better for them, right? So we have our 3 pillars of our KPIs, which show slightly different information for everybody. They're for our CIOs and their senior leadership teams. Then, as we're maturing our practice, we were looking at other tools that were out there. So we've got observability, we've got security, tools that were purchased for the firm for different reasons. They were never brought in for FinOps. They weren't there originally predominantly for that at all. So as we looked at them, we went, are they able to provide us data that can give us cost avoidance and saving opportunities? I have on the screen there, I've got some sample bots. We use our security tool that goes out there, and we use our bots. These bots help us to provide hygiene and clean up the cloud space after our developers have been there. We want them using the innovation that the cloud provides for them. So if we can automate stuff to make their life easier, we will try and do that. We know that this is never ending, and these are just a sample. Like, we've got Lumberzak, which is top left one there. He just goes out there and he turns off your EC2 instances at the weekend. We've got Oscar, who goes out there and cleans up the trash. If you've got nowhere to send your traffic from a load balancer, we'll delete it for you. We've got our volume cleanups, our snapshot removals, and there's information up there from previous working groups on finops.org as well about that one as well. So we've got observability tools as well that helps us to look at the utilization of our existing compute, stuff that is beyond what we're getting natively out of our tooling, out of the cloud service providers, and gives us that information to help us to look at our Kubernetes and get more information for people to be able to take actions and utilize. So we also have going back again to my KPI dashboards, which is where we bring all of this data into. It's on the next slide there, please. We bring it all in from all of these different observability tools, our security tools, and as well as our cost management tools. We bring it all in. We got our right sizing recommendations from third parties, from the cloud provider native tools, as well as specialized tools for Kubernetes and things like that. When we bring all that in, we kind of go, where is that data coming from? Is it coming from CloudWatch? Is it coming from the third-party agents? And how can we utilize it? How can we build it up? So as I said, we have our 3 pillars there for our KPI. But below each of those pillars, we've got supporting metrics. So we've got more information that allows our teams to drive down to. Again, pulling it all together, allowing them to then dig in and go further and further into the information. I have there, just as I said, a snapshot of my business unit score, of the business unit scores. And if I go to the next tool there as well, we take that and we drive it even further back down and get into our senior leadership team, right? And we create a leaderboard of senior leaders. I've just got it blacked out there, just at the names and stuff like that. But what that shows us is we create this hall or this wall of fame, as opposed to, traditionally you create a leaderboard and you're trying to shame the guys at the bottom to get to the top. What we actually try to do here is to show the success that is being done by our engineers, by the people using the cloud, how they are making things better with the information we're able to get to them, right? So as we matured our practice, we want to do more with all the data that these different tools can give us. So we would try and pull this data out and make it back visible to people. So in closing, I guess we're still on a learning journey as we use these tools. We have as I said, about 17,000 technologists working on about 11,000 applications within Fidelity. And we know it's going to be difficult to get the developer community to move on any one tool. So what we try to do is we have our takeaways, which is when we look at this stuff, we have making our FinOps data visible, right? Which is, one of the principles of FinOps anyway, FinOps Foundation, I should say. You must know what your bill is. You must know what you are consuming. We are always trying to say, looking at the tools we have, when I think of that one, use the tools that are there. So we never thought about our observability tools or our security tools as being able to help us from a FinOps point of view at the start. And we probably would never have gone and purchased those tools to do FinOps stuff, but they give us information that is useful to us and helps us. There's always new tools coming. There's always new people trying to sell you stuff. But sometimes maybe you've got something that's there as well that you can use that's there. So can you take the data from those tools, make it actionable and meaningful to your end users? And then what we're trying to do is put the data where our engineers are. Can we create their culture, a better culture of accountability for them? If everyone is responsible for their spend, can we get information out to where it's to them? They may not always be able to come to my dashboard. They maybe have a load of dashboards already that they're being sent to look at. So what we're trying to do is putting that information out there, again, developing tools ourselves that will do that for us again, or some notifier tool to get that information back out to the edge. So that's our tooling.
That is amazing. All the comments in the chat have been blowing up. I've been collecting a bunch of questions that folks have for you. Based on time, we're going to need to move forward, but we do have the breakouts at the end. So I'm hoping you can stay around for a bit to answer questions at that point, because people want to know a lot about this. So thank you so much for hearing the overview.
No problem. Thank you.
Right. In next to the FinOps assessment, which I believe is back to Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Yeah, speaking of tools, we felt like we need to bring up the fact that we have worked on deploying a brand new open source tool to the community. So I want to back up a little bit. When you are going through the phase of adopting FinOps, and then you finally have your practice launched, whether that's a dedicated team or a few individuals that are doing it, you're going to want to make sure that you're really maximizing the benefit of that staff that's working on FinOps, and then also seeing that you're driving the cultural changes. And so you're going to want to continually mature your practice and evaluate the progress that you're making on that. And so an assessment is a really great tool at a high level to see like what your current state is and identify other target areas that you want to develop. So back in 2022, we had a working group that spun up and developed an assessment playbook, and you can find that on FinOps.org. And that really sat and talked about the fact that we need to know what we are ambitious to achieve and what we're currently at. And we defined something called lenses, a way to look at the different capabilities. So you're looking at it through knowledge, through process, through automation, through adoption. And each of those lenses, we put in like 5 performative steps. So maybe you're at a level 0, and that's what that looks like. But you're trying to get to, a level 4. So that's the playbook. It was put out there. It's been about a year. And then we took it a little bit step further. So that enterprise slide that we just showed a few minutes ago, Fidelity being one of those enterprise partners, helped us pilot doing a guided assessment. And so we actually walked them through it. And from that, we developed an open source tool. And so the idea behind this tool is that you could use it for a variety of business cases. Going back to the principle that teams need to collaborate, and assessment is a really great tool to really have those different conversations and look for ways that you could be innovating together. So you may want to use an assessment for like an internal team review. So maybe I'm the manager and I've got 5 people that report to me. Let's do this assessment every quarter and make sure we're all on the same page, and we can actually start building out our team roadmap. You may also want to do this assessment because maybe you have a federated model where you have a centralized team and you've got many business units that are consuming your FinOps services, and you maybe have one business unit that's further ahead than another business unit. It'd be great to be able to baseline across those business units and figure out which capabilities you need to spend more time developing or working on knowledge training there. The other area this assessment could come into play is going back to the story I said earlier. Maybe you're really good at doing FinOps for one cloud provider, but you actually want to do it for another cloud provider. And so you could be assessing how your organization has adopted the FinOps practice and your maturity across 2 cloud providers as well. Those are just a couple of examples. I'm sure you all could think of other ways that you would use this assessment. So this is our official announcement. We did a little light test of this back in Amsterdam. But if you go to the next slide, JR, you all can now go out to assessment.finops.org only on your desktop, and you'll be able to see this tool. You can go ahead and log in. The reason you log in is because we want you to be able to save your different assessments that you do. We have a lot of features in the pipeline where you could maybe do some comparison of those assessments. You will select the capabilities that you want to assess. You can do all of them. You can select a few of them. You will set your target scores. You'll measure. The value of this is also putting in the comments so you know exactly why you decided to pick that score, that time, that month. And then you also have a feature to be able to share this or download this. And again, we'll have some more features coming probably before X and then after X as well. So we're really looking for feedback on this right now. So if you want to go take it and just assess where you think your organization is now, there's also a spot inside the tool where you can tell us bug fixes or other enhancements that you'd like to see. And I think most importantly, at the end of this assessment, it points you to different resources that are on the FinOps.org website. So we're hoping that will be a valuable tool for you all. If you all get into it and have any questions or want to do a one-on-one on it, just feel free to ping me as well.
Very cool stuff. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I got some questions in there for you as well that I'm going to hold for the breakouts, and we will come back to those shortly. So we mentioned the European Community Day that was in April. There was a talk there that actually was so good and related to this tooling space and how people are putting it together that we wanted to bring them back to do this virtually because that event was not, unfortunately, recorded. So wanted to welcome 2 folks from our European community, Krisztián and Lóránt from Amadeus, who had the really nice opportunity to sit down with, as I was saying at the beginning. We connected not necessarily during the event, but at the drinks event afterwards, sitting and talking about where all this is going, which is another great reason to come in person to these things. So wanted to pass the 2 of you to share how you're doing your ekosystem of both tooling and homegrown tools.
Thank you very much, JR. And it's a really, really nice introduction, and we are excited to be here. My name is Krisztián Borbély. I'm in Amadeus responsible in the platform unit from the platform business management, which entails our relationship between the platform and all the business units, as well as FinOps and service insights globally. And I'm here with Lóránt, who is head of FinOps engineering in Amadeus. Well, Amadeus, I mean, most of you guys probably have not heard about Amadeus. We are a B2B company, but I would bet that most of you have used Amadeus in the last 12 months. Why? Well, we are really behind most of the journey of this planet. So basically, we are traveling the global travel ecosystem, and we have a lot of airlines and all the other customers, as you can see it. Why it is relevant in the FinOps context? It's because it's quite a noticeable operations we have. You see some numbers there. So today, we are still mainly operate from our own data centers. But it's quite a sizable operations, and there's a lot of complexity, which is also leading some of the decisions we made, which we will share with you on how we are seeing the FinOps ecosystem. And I deliberately don't use the word tool, but you can use it as we also heard it this before. It's really, we see it as a tooling ecosystem. And then we can go to the next slide where I will start sharing a little bit on our journey before Lóránt is really doing the deep dive on the tool itself and the ecosystem. So we started with the cloud quite a few years back. What is quite specific for Amadeus is when you see something which is, say, Amadeus Cloud Services. So we do deploy our technical platform on top of the cloud providers. We are also multi-cloud provider, but we're having our own platform, which we deploy technically, so OpenShift, Kubernetes, but it's a lot of other things around observability, about different toolings around where we deploy all our other applications. And since we talk about travel, you as a traveler, you can imagine that there are a lot of different products and services and touch points. So we have a lot of applications, 400 plus, sitting on those 60,000 plus VMs. But when we look at from a business perspective, where we are charging our cost to the business units, and they want to know the cost per product, there is a lot of many-to-many relationship. So imagine the cloud provider infrastructure, then we have a platform on it, which limits a bit the visibility which we can get from the cloud providers in terms of what is running inside our own platform. And then you have a large number of applications and middlewares and components which contribute to different business products in a many-to-many relationship. So it's definitely quite a key importance for us to be able to allocate those costs and show it accurately to the users. And as part of this allocation, actually, this is something which we can go back just for a second, JR, thanks. As part of the allocation, this is where we decided that we open source that, so we will make that available for the community. And basically what you are going to see today is what we have live. So this is the Amadeus FinOps Data Lake and Application Launch. So we went live, we see how it works, and this is why we wanted to share with you guys. So now we can go to the next slide, and I hand over to Lóránt.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. So my name is Lóránt Kish, and I'm FinOps engineering manager for Amadeus, responsible to bring about the FinOps ecosystem tooling. And today I brought you actually 4 pieces of content, 2 of them more theoretical, 2 of them more practical. So the 2 theoretical ones are actually from the very slide deck I used to discuss with our top management the FinOps concepts. So it is about our vision, which you see already on the screen, and about our strategy. And the 2 other pieces of content is more deep dive on our allocation process, as well as screenshots from our tool. So starting with the ecosystem vision, at the center of this vision, you see application and product focus. So what does this mean? It actually means that in most conversations today, people use the cloud provider terms like subscription, project, or account when they talk about the cloud. And in reality, in our business, people both on the engineering and business side understand much more the internal products and applications. So we said this should be actually the first-class citizen of our tooling. This should be the main dimension we slice and dice the data on, or we access from the menu. And around this central thought, you see 6 other cornerstones. Day 1 tagging, very simple. You can actually let people not do tagging or do crappy tagging and try to fix this problem after the fact by grouping and trying to fix. Or you can take an approach with automation to make sure that things get in the cloud the first day, and also they stay healthy quality by human and machine readable tagging policies, as well as quality checks and follow-up. On the top right, you see unit economics efficiency. I think this is something that is very familiar to this audience. So beside your total cost, you need to consider your business volumes, and so you can calculate your unit economics efficiency. And I'm very happy that in the 2nd edition of the Cloud FinOps book, actually, this made it from a nirvana state to a more main body content. An addition here is actually, it's interesting to look at the contribution of your metrics to the profit and the fixed cost. Going further to the top left, blue, metered shared cost allocation, I need to clarify here that this is not the shared cost that is directly in the bill, and we have difficulties to allocate it, for example, typically network or security costs. But this is more about the complexity. Chris mentioned that we have multiple layers of applications in Amadeus. We have platform services, and in turn, we have business applications. And to be able to track on a metered basis this cost flow, we aimed for this cornerstone. Moving on to the green bottom left, improved distributed forecasting. I mean, forecasting is often a topic that people think simply of. They take the past data, they put a machine learning algorithm on top of it, project it for the future, and your forecast is ready. It might be a fairly good quality for the next month or few months, but in reality, it's much better if your forecast, especially for a bit longer term, is driven by your business input. The most knowledge in an organization typically is in the business units with product managers who can anticipate customers onboarding your business. And so these business volumes can drive your data and can be translated to cloud forecast numbers. On the bottom right, you see open data leverage. I think it's very good if you own your data, if you can load your data to in-memory databases to fast report on it, and if you can mix it with your business data so you get the most benefit from it. And on the bottom, you see structured optimization approach. Practically, this is to say that beyond the very well-known commitment-based discounts and usage optimization, you have a lot more. You have ways to optimize it by re-architecting your products. You have ways to optimize it even by managing technical debt, like upgrading software versions, where you can gain performance efficiency, and so on and so forth. So this is about the vision. And on the next slide, we're going to see how to implement this. So we know where we want to go. Now we need to see, okay, how we go there. So the first thing we did is actually lay out on this diagram you see in the background, what are the key components, what are the key capabilities of our FinOps ecosystem that we need to bring about. And the second question was, do we have something already that we can use to attack or deliver some of these components, something from the cloud provider, first of all. Then on the second layer, you can check if it's not available from the cloud provider, can I buy it from the market? And if it's not adequate, what you see, then you can consider building it and assess whether building it is worthwhile. So we went through this exercise, and I will highlight a couple of findings here. Obviously, it's simplified, but I would be happy to talk more about the details of this ecosystem in a different occasion. So taking, for example, the transversal box on the top right, you see things like global policies, managing the tagging. And we found that as our major footprint is in Azure, we found that the Azure policies or our PaaS tooling like OpenShift Policy Agent or using infrastructure as code can help us to achieve this day one tagging and keep a good quality. Going to the bottom right box, optimization. It has many facets, but again, looking at the cloud provider tooling, maybe not perfect, but it's usable from Azure, the advisor recommendations, and even the APIs where you can get insight into your VM utilization or your orphaned resources on different layers. And we happen to have ServiceNow for IT asset management, as well as demand management. And we found that in ServiceNow, there is VM scheduling functionality where your development and test boxes could be scheduled. So we are considering that instead of building something. Then actually we went to more challenging components as well, like the allocation on the top right, or some of the planning forecasting features roughly in the middle to the left, where we looked at market options, but we did not find them adequate. So eventually we evaluated, what if we build our own data solution, leveraging our data mesh platform, build a data mesh node, and put a BI solution on top of it and work with it. And actually, I will in the next slide do a deep dive on the allocation piece for you. And here I have actually a very good news, as Chris mentioned. This allocation piece, main contributor is Mark Perot, but there are others as well in Amadeus. Is open source, so you can grab it, you can use it for your own advantage. And I explained to you in a nutshell what this does. So we can split actually our layers of complexity or infrastructure into four pieces here. On the bottom, you see the cloud infrastructure represented here by the Azure bill, and the little blue boxes are the billing rows from the Azure bill. These bills contain as well the tagging information. And obviously here we tag the first layer of services. So we have costs attached to, for example, OpenShift and Argos, which appear now on the second layer, the platform services. And this is fairly easy to allocate. But then the next layer is getting more challenging because you don't have tagging data from the cloud provider environment to work with. But in OpenShift's case, for example, we are extracting information from our monitoring tooling based on Prometheus, coming from the labels in OpenShift, which we can then use to do the cost allocation based on the CPU memory requests and so on and so forth. In Argos case, the Argos team is providing us data about the number of time series that the different teams are using for monitoring purposes in their platform. So we are interacting with these teams and also helping a lot in central FinOps to bring about additional allocation data. And we can make it to the next layer, to the business applications. Here I put as an example our customer management and flight management. This makes sure that you guys can board the aircraft and also that the plane can leave the runway. And in turn, these applications are and will be providing cost allocation keys to the final level, which is the product level, and has nothing to do now. It's very far from the cloud infrastructure. It's more a marketing, it's more a business term that our BUs speak. And this way we can bridge the gap from the bottom to the top. And imagine this gives possibilities from the top to drill down and understand your cost composition to the very bottom. So to show you what we can get from this, the next slide is showing a screenshot from our recent release of the system. I picked a view of a platform service here. So imagine Amadeus has database team who is serving in turn business applications like customer and flight management. And this is an engineering focused view. The database team can come here. They look at the middle darker blue box and they immediately see for the period selected, our cost was 135K. On the left side, actually you see where this 135K is coming together. On the top, you see the top light blue box, you see that the direct Azure consumption, you can imagine, VM storage infrastructure directly consumed from Azure is 100K. On the bottom, you see other Amadeus services like the mentioned Argos monitoring, or even our FinOps services feeding into 35K to this cost. So this altogether is the Oracle cost, but it's not the reason why this cost exists, that we sell databases to customers. In turn, customer management, flight management has databases in Oracle. So this cost you see in the amount of 120K on the bottom right is going toward the customers themselves. You can notice there is a difference of 15K. So this is not yet allocated. Obviously, this data is dummy, but this can happen, for example, if the allocation is not perfect yet, or if the database team is deciding to invest into something specific which the customers didn't request, but for example, operationally relevant. And going further, there is possibility to drill down. And on the next slide, we drill down to the cost by consumer. So practically the bottom right box. One back, please. And this will show us, exactly, this will show us who are the customers of the Oracle database, how is the evolution over time, and you can slice and dice, for example, by the different environment, such as production or test environment. In reality, this is pretty interactive. I see JR is loving shuffling. It's okay. And you can slice and dice, and you can go even one level deeper. You can choose, for example, the Rev application on the next slide. You will see if you drill down to that level, you see actually the meters appearing, certain instances of this Rev application like Dev3, Dev6, how much space they have used, how much storage quota they have in Oracle, and this in turn is translated to cost. So you can imagine the possibilities this way. And we have other views, executive views, business views, management views, finance, central FinOps to tailor for the individual personas. And this takes us actually to the wrap up. I think we can just summarize the key takeaways. Number one, use the language of your business. I think it's good to have technical talk, but to include everybody and make it easier use the language of your business. That's what everybody can relate to. Number two, dare to aim high with your FinOps tooling expectations. And I would highlight here, two of the things I mentioned: owning your data, being able to mix it, being able to fast report on it is to me not a luxury, but more a baseline requirement. And I think some smart vendors probably should attack or will attack this area, not to prevent users from using and mixing their own data. Another example was the forecasting. So I think whether you build or buy things, it's interesting to put the expectations to what you need. And third point, talking about tool and ecosystem, it is not a tool to solve FinOps. We've seen it actually, it ties in very nicely to the data findings from the beginning and the previous presentation as well. It's not a tool we're talking about, it's an ecosystem. So all pieces, all gears in this ecosystem need to play together to get the benefit we want. So the question is not really to build or to buy. The question is really what to build and what to buy. And that actually wraps it up. So one more takeaway, which is really tangible for you, is the code. I hope it will be shared on the chat, and just go to the Git repo and enjoy.
Great work, folks. Thank you for that. Yeah, definitely also liked, as mentioned in the chat, the what to build and what to buy, because we are seeing a big ecosystem emerge around all the task capabilities and functions that are needed for FinOps. So cool to see how you piece that together. Moving into the core underlying foundational part of all FinOps is the billing data. And the next two talks we have, one by Sanjna, one by Udam, are really going to dig into what I like to call if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of FinOps, this graph, it's like you have to have your physiological needs met for you to deal with safety and esteem and all these bits in psychology. I would say billing data is sort of at the base of this in FinOps, right? You've got to have the billing data clearly articulated, understood, delivered in the way that Noel was talking about, to the business at the right time in the path of the engineers. So in these next two talks, we're going to dig in a bit around how the billing data looks differently in different providers, and then also some of the open source efforts to help normalize this through the upcoming focus project to get to what I think Sanjna calls tidy data, which I thought was a great way to do that. So with that, I'm going to pass to Sanjna, who is a staff data scientist at VMware and is a practitioner working on billing data there. Sanjna, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, JR. Hello and good morning to you all. I'm really excited to be here. I joined the FinOps Foundation, I think about 4 years ago, and it was quite small then. It was a few hundred people, but I still remember the warm welcome I received, and the organization still as warm as it is with 1,000 and counting. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk to you about normalizing your cloud billing data. As introduced earlier, my name is Sanjna Srivatsa, and I am a staff data scientist at VMware. But at the core of it, I am a FinOps practitioner with my cloud business office. We can get started. Okay. We can start off by looking at snapshots of billing data from the three major cloud providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure. So AWS, for example, can have dozens or potentially hundreds of columns, depending on your tags. So it becomes hard to truly show the data in its entirety. But what you have here is an anonymized small subset of important columns from the real data set itself. Although I've given you very little to work with right off the bat, you can tell that there are many differences between these data sets. And if you have any differences that you have noticed, please put them in the chat. And we'd like to hear what you think are your major differences that you see across your three clouds. Before we dive into the details of these differences, I want to take an example use case and kind of see how we would navigate it using this original structure of billing data that exists. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's assume you are a multi-cloud company and you have about 50% coverage of resource or spend-based commitments across your clouds, which is RIs and SPs. This means that some of your accounts or projects are getting a good discount and some of them aren't. So this means potentially budgets getting overshot, forecasts being wrong, and a lot of angry emails and unhappy DMs. So you decide to implement a fairer cost allocation system that peanut butter spreads discounts to all of your accounts. For this, you would need the following data: a method to identify discounted usage and your cost before and after discounts. So now I want to say that this is the most simplistic form of pseudocode I could put in here. It doesn't include nuances like credits, EDP, or tiered discounts if any of this apply to you. But you can see that it can quickly get complicated to use this data. But more importantly, my experience as a developer or an analyst or a data scientist is not consistent across 3 clouds. This means anyone like me in my company will probably have to spend the time to understand these nuances, the discount models of each cloud, how it presents itself, and when truly all they want to know is what is my cost before and after a discount. Now, I know all of you are probably not a multi-cloud company. Most of you are probably just a single cloud, work with a single cloud provider, and that's okay. If you are a multi-cloud company like we are, you will feel a stronger need for this normalization because of just how differently each cloud showcases their billing data. But even if you are a single cloud provider, even if you work with just a single cloud provider, you still want to reduce the effort that it takes to learn the data set for all the people working with this data in your company. You just want to make the data more understandable and more accessible. Okay, next slide, please.
Sanjna, I was just commenting on the chat. Also, somebody was saying that this looks like very different data sets. And I think that's kind of the point, right? You're making, like, that they are so different between the cloud providers.
Exactly, yeah. So as JR said, I want to introduce you to a concept of tidy data. The tidy data is a concept in R, which I am an avid user of. But if you use pandas in Python, you may have heard of the concept of wide format data as compared to narrow format data. And this is wide format or tidy data, as we call it. And you can see that the structure of data, the tidy data set itself will have 1 observation per row, 1 variable per column, and 1 value per box of like an Excel or CSV, if you will. You may be more familiar with the words measure and dimensions because I've heard that being used a lot in the industry. So I'll explain what that means. In this case, if you add one new measure to your data set, you get 1 more column. And I'm doing something with my mouse, but I'm realizing that you're not able to see it. But basically, if you add 1 additional measure, you get 1 additional column, but it will not have any impact to the number of rows. But if you add a dimension, however, it makes your data richer. And so it adds a column, but in addition, it also has a significant impact on the number of rows. So let's kind of look at what tidy data or normalized data looks like from a multi-cloud perspective. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is what a normalized or a tidy data set for multi-cloud billing would look like. You can already see it's cleaner. You can define what list price, net price, and effective price means for you. But in this case, I have considered list price to be public pricing, so absolutely no discounts involved. Net price will be some layer of discounts involved if you have applicable EDP or tiered discounts or credits, something like that. Effective price would be price after your RI savings plan, whatever you want, but distributed across all of your accounts. The beauty of this format is that it scales up and down pretty seamlessly. So if you want to know what your static IP costs are, for example, in AWS, you would just add a dimension, as I alluded to earlier, called level to cloud service or something like that. And it's just as simple as adding a column saying level to cloud category, and you can make this data as rich or as zoomed out as you want. Same goes for adding a measure. So you probably want to know the month-on-month growth rate for each of these services. So it just show up as a new column and a measure, and you can make this data as rich or as zoomed out as you want. And working with this kind of data is easy. Your data scientists and your analysts will love it. It is scalable. And most importantly, it works really well with APIs. If you're feeding data into a microservice, this is a really good way to have your data. You can collapse this data, make it less granular, very easy to aggregate this data. You can have this data set just kind of zoom into just an account level per cloud, and that you can do it very easily. So this, depending on the size of your data, financial analysts can work with this data very easily on Excel. Or if you have much larger data like we do, you may need a big data system like Hadoop or something else. Next slide, please. Okay, So let's talk a little bit about unnormalized data differences in AWS, GCP, and Azure. I see on the chat that it's blowing up, and you've all kind of identified really good differences between the three clouds. But I have kind of summarized a few of them for you here. And I will also violate JR's protocol of not having a pitch, because I have a pitch at the end of this for focus. So currency is different across the three clouds depending on how you've enabled your billing system. Pricing model is different. So AWS bills per hour or per second depending on the product. GCP bills per second standard. Billing period is mostly monthly, but for some services you may have hourly billing. Product categories, this one's my favorite because it can get really complicated really fast. EC2 product code, for example, in AWS includes EBS volume, static IP, NAT gateway, etc. Azure, on the other hand, has virtual machines, a meta category column called virtual machines, which only includes compute. In GCP, the service description column, which says compute engine, it includes network, egress, ingress, static IP, and storage. So it's, as you can see, the combination of what these cloud providers call to be compute is very different. And so there is truly a strong need for normalization and kind of making that lingo consistent, so that you don't have to have all of your thousands of engineers learn the same language and learn all of these nuances just to be able to work with the data. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are my takeaways. The structure of how the data is represented is different across the three clouds in their billing. There is definitely a benefit to transforming all of them into a tidy structure, as we showed, with consistent naming. Time granularity, currency, usage metrics, billing period, pricing model, data units, all of these are just examples of some of the differences across the three clouds. And even if you aren't a multi-cloud company at this point, there is definitely a benefit to normalizing your data and having consistent terminology. As Amadeus mentioned in their previous presentation, also making this language specific to your business and your company is really beneficial, and normalization is kind of the base of it. And if you have more ideas on what is the differences between the three clouds and how you can have a consistent naming structure, please join us in our focus group, which I believe Udam will talk to you next about. It's a fantastic group. Udam's fantastic. I've learned so much from being a part of the group already. So I strongly suggest you join if you already haven't. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjna. I loved that there were so many comments in there about you should present data in this way, or this needs to be this way. And that's exactly what I saw all of you do in the group, which was there was no like one right answer. It felt like across all the clouds, right? And how to include this cost or don't include this cost, or blended or unblended, or amortized, all these things. So it was fascinating to watch you walk through these processes. We haven't formally announced this yet, and I would love to do it here. Hope he doesn't mind. But Udam is a long-term practitioner from the community who was at Citi for a number of years doing as a global head of cloud financial management. And he was so excited about this focus project, it was a working group, that he actually decided to leave Citi, and he's now actually joined the Linux Foundation full-time with us to help push this forward. So we're so honored to have Udam on the team with us now. And thank you for taking this leap and for helping to push forward this project. And we'd love to hear what you're working on with it.
Thank you, JR. Thanks. It almost feels like I don't need to give this presentation, because I think Noel and Lóránt and Sanjna all made a pretty good case about needing focus. I'm expecting about 1,000 signups here later today from all of you. As JR said, my name is Udam. I've been in this space for a while. Looked at this problem set from, this is the fourth lens through which I'm looking at it. Worked at a cloud vendor, then cost management vendor, then at Citi running cloud financial management, and now joining the foundation, primarily to work on focus, as Chair said. So when we say focus, we're not yelling at you to pay attention, by the way. We just try and tell you about this specification. So as you see here, it is an open source specification for cloud billing data. So we're sort of working from the output and then working backwards from there. The output is really a FinOps serviceable data format. Many of you are consumers of the billing data, and many of you, as we see in the chat and everything, are very passionate about the billing data and being able to extract value out of it. We're working from that backwards to figure out what needs to be in the data in terms of dimensions and metrics and attributes. Then we're trying to get that into a vendor-neutral cross-cloud schema. And more importantly, we're also trying to get that terminology to be aligned with FinOps. Obviously, there's this great framework, the books, the trainings, et cetera. We really need the cloud billing data to line up with what we learn in FinOps. So that's a big goal here as well. As you can see, this is for both sides of this equation. One side is the cost data producers, so your cloud and SaaS providers that generate cost and usage data, and then on the other side are the consumers, as well as the cost management vendors that try to provide insights from this data. This is a brand new project under the Linux Foundation. It's sponsored by the FinOps Foundation. If you recall, there was a open billing working group last year. We paused that. We handed over all that work to this new project. And many of the staff members here, JR and Mike and Rob and Vaz and others have spent countless days, forming this new entity, primarily for the purpose of ensuring that there's a free open source specification for all parties to use, the vendors and providers that generate this data, as well as organizations and consumers of the data that want to use it. So that's a very important part for us. Next slide, please. So why focus? Like I said, I think all the folks that went before me made probably a better case than I can make. But I'll summarize it this way. We're trying to build trust in the cost and usage data or billing data because your organizations want to make value-based judgments or decisions about using cloud, about how much cloud, about what to use cloud on, et cetera. And in order to do that, they need a comprehensive view about your cost and usage of using cloud to make those decisions. Secondly, our FinOps practitioners' lives are very complicated today, as Sanjna just highlighted. It's impacted by the complexity and the inconsistency in the data. So, and that complexity and inconsistency grows linearly as you add more vendors or providers. And that's a fairly common thing. As your organization matures, you're going to use more providers, but also you want to make decisions based on broader information. Lóránt made a very good presentation and case for, including all the shared components. And I saw somebody ask, what about labor costs and et cetera. So your organization as it matures is going to want to make these decisions, not just based on one cloud vendor's billing data, but the overall picture. So that's where we come in. And again, I don't need to make the case here that many of you have called that this is a problem that you face in terms of driving FinOps in your organization. So here's a visual representation of what I'm talking about. As you see up top, you're getting this different proprietary formats and schema and terminology, and the burden is on the practitioner to try to do some magic and put this together. In the future, this is what we think this is going to look like, where many vendors will lean in, the providers will lean in and produce the data. in focus specification. If you're a brand new provider, you're probably just going to adopt this specification rather than try to create yet another proprietary way of providing the billing data. If you're an existing vendor, you're probably looking to incorporate this into your billing data and cost management capabilities today. And some set of providers may not adopt the specification, and that's okay. We will have the ability to use our FinOps community and the broader community to create open source connectors that convert the data into the focus specification, so we can still get the benefit of a lot of the normalization. So yeah, that's kind of the reasoning. And I can tell you firsthand, I mean, this is the problem that I was solving at Citi the last few years. We had a broad platform across multiple cloud vendors, SaaS vendors, licensing and other internal costs, and our thousands of applications that want to use cloud. They wanted a overall visibility, a single bill for their usage, not to do cost management on every single vendor individually. So hopefully this is a common problem that many of you are facing as well, and we'll get a benefit through this specification. Next slide. Just tell you a little bit about the roadmap. As I mentioned, the team's been working really hard to get focus stood up. We have the steering committee formed as of March. Working groups. So then we started working on the contract license, contributor license agreement. That got published last week. We've had, I think, 7 or 8 people that have already gone through the process and gotten their approvals. There's probably a dozen or more people that are currently going through the process. So a lot of interest. We've kicked off the first working group earlier this week. There's another meeting happening today to work on this stuff. And we're kicking off a second group most likely next week. Both these groups will be working on this initial 0.5 release that we're targeting for FinOps X. That is targeting a lot of cost reporting and chargeback use cases. So I saw the discussion earlier about amortized and using that for chargeback and all that kind of stuff. These are exact problems that we're trying to make sure we solve with the specification. So we're starting with the cloud service providers costs, and then for V1.0 and beyond, it's really about expanding beyond cost reporting and chargeback to other FinOps capabilities, as well as adding support for more data providers, so SaaS costs, third-party and internal costs, et cetera. Next slide. And finally, how to get involved. Just the same pitch as what's been said before. These are the early days of this specification. It's a great opportunity to get involved and really start helping to form what the specification is doing, what problems it solves, and how we end up solving those things. We are on GitHub. That's where you can see our progress, see our issues that we're working on, how it's organized into versions, et cetera. The contributor license agreement, that's an important part that's also in GitHub. This is necessary because this is a closed group for contribution because we want to ensure that whole royalty-free specification. So your employer will need to provide you an authorization to come contribute to the specification. Connect with us on chat-focus and our website. We just updated a bunch of content there yesterday. So yeah, super excited to see all of you get involved and contribute. Thank you.
Yeah, want to give a big shout out also to all the folks who started on this working group originally. I think Maxim from Palo Alto was one of the original folks. We changed it, and the history, funnily enough, was Udam was doing a podcast with a guy, Nathan Besh, in the industry, and they talked about the need for this, and we saw it, and we're like, yes, we need to make that happen. And so it's been a long process to get here. I think probably 9 months to get the project formally formed with all the legal, but thank you for everybody who's participated and getting involved. We really see this as like a defining piece of what this community can put out and really help change the core problem for better for the group for the long term, and bring other types of spending into FinOps land beyond just infrastructure as well, which is becoming more and more critical. Great. Also, again, a thank you to all the both vendors and consultants and organizations who are a formal part of the foundation, who make everything we do possible and contribute so much expertise. A lot of these are joining the focus program. Some of them are even contributing open source portions of their platform. They're like giving parts of their platform into this solution to take off the issue of normalized spend data. Cool. So the last couple of bits we have for you are real world outputs from working groups within the foundation that have recently put out content and best practices. Going to pass to Sam to share what's coming up and going on in working group land, and then we'll hear about those specific outputs.
Thanks, JR. So our working groups are small groups of community members who are meeting on a weekly basis to focus their efforts on a particular FinOps challenge or a FinOps activity, with the ultimate goal of producing valuable content for all of us here and the wider FinOps community. And so at current, we have 2 working groups who are in the proposal pending phase and or awaiting approval of their proposal. I believe the commitment-based discounts is expecting their proposal to be approved later today. But we also have 10 active working groups and many, many more with completed outputs. The KPI working group, which is under that incubating idea status, I believe you guys might have heard about that at last month's summit. And that's still an idea we're kicking around. However, the data workflows working group idea is a bit further along. And that's the one I'm curious to know if anyone here is interested in participating in. JR, if you could go to the next slide, please. At current, the plans for this working group is to focus on the best practices for and the how-tos of getting a single source to serve as the truth for cost visibility. And I hope to officially move this working group idea from the incubating status to the proposal pending phase, assuming sufficient community interest from folks like yourself. So if you are interested, please let us know in the Zoom chat. Go join that Slack channel, the working group data workflows, Sprint 0. That's the name of the channel. Or feel free to reach out to me directly via email or Slack as well. Now I know you might be wondering, okay, that was one great opportunity, but what other working groups are there? When do they meet? How do I find out about them? And you can do that by visiting our community events page to see which working groups are meeting and when, and also to request to join there as well. But additionally, we have our project overview page, which displays a list of all of our working groups. And that's the place to go if you have a new idea for a working group that you'd like to submit to staff for review as consideration. But in any scenario, if you have any working group related questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly and I'd be happy to address your questions. But today we have the working group leads of each managing anomalies and cost allocation working groups with us to share an update of what they've been working on. So without further delay, I'll go ahead and pass things on over to Larry. Thanks all.
Hello, hi everyone. Next slide, please. My name is Larry Advey. I'm the working group lead here for the cost allocations group. We've wrapped up Sprint 1. We tackled creating a guide, really walking through the values and benefits of cost allocation. Talked a lot about strategies for such, and also intersects with other frameworks. A lot of really good participation within the team to bring together just really good information around cost allocation. And quite frankly, we were just getting started. Next slide. So yeah, our results, just high level. You'll see it in the document. I believe it's been published. It may be live now, but really just talking about benefits and values of cost allocation, right? Without it, we can't get a whole lot done for what we're doing here. The strategies of such, and responsibilities, and how this interacts with other framework intersections, and all the good stuff within. Next slide. Yeah, so we've got Sprint 2s going on right now. If you're interested, hit us up on the Slack channel. It's listed at the bottom there. We've got a larger group now with Sprint 2, which is very exciting. We're going to be doing more of a deep dive on shared costs. That is a lot more complex, not looks to be pretty much what Sprint 2's lining up to look like and be our main focus. The cost allocation decision template and cost allocation user stories are on scope as well, potential RACI and some other things too. But if you're interested in cost allocation, want to get more involved, hit us up at the chat cost allocation. Myself or Sam can assist you there. Next slide. Special thank you to Peter Brent, Amanda Dalton, Janine Picker-Green, and myself being primary contributors here at Sprint 1.
Great work, Larry. I gotta say, Sam, I feel like we see Amanda in like every other working group. She's in a ton of these. Great job, Amanda, as well. Next up, we have Managing Anomalies with Angel Alves.
Yes, hello, thank you. So today I'm here to give you an overview on the Managing Anomalies Sprint 1. So my name is Angel, I'm based in sunny Portugal, a FinOps senior manager for a French Fortune 500 company in the building material business. And in parallel, I'm also a FinOps ambassador for this amazing community. As worker group lead, I'm honored to give you an overview of what this working group has achieved on the first sprint of Managing Anomalies. So our goal, as you can state here, as you can see there, it's to offer guidance on anomaly detection and management so that organizations can avoid or at least minimize the impact of unexpected changes. This will come in the format of a white paper explaining why an anomaly, what is an anomaly, why it is important, what can be a normal flow, and how can be measured. So moving to the next slides, we can find here one of the key outcomes of the sprint, which is the life cycle of the anomaly. The first disclaimer is that depending on the organization maturity, there might be some changes. We haven't addressed yet maturity topic this sprint, but now on sprint 2 that we just started, this is one of the topics we will address and hopefully get more details into it. So the process, it's or this life cycle, as we have named it, it's very simple. Everything starts with an anomaly detection, which should be done by a tool. Then it will create a record and launch a notification. This notification might be to a central FinOps team or to the owner of the impacted resources. Once this person receives the notification, we'll conduct an analysis to understand if this is a real anomaly, a false alert, or what is the root cause of it. Once it is detected, the root cause, then we can jump into resolution and stop this cost increase. And finally, we have a retrospective that with the information that we collected from the anomaly, we can improve our tools and processes. The details of each step then will be found in the document. So in the next slide, please, are a few more topics that we addressed at this sprint. So we have a definition of what is an anomaly. We have some KPIs that will help the business to measure the impact of an anomaly. And also we identify the role of each persona during the life cycle. Next slide. So these were the results of sprint 1. And now we have just to kick off sprint 2. And this sprint, we are looking at maturity, as I mentioned, refine the RACI matrix for each step, and provide some insights about tools or automation that can be used to measure and manage anomalies, and how this capability does intersect with others, for example, forecasting, just to give an example. At the same time, we would like to start collecting some user stories from anyone that has either good or bad experience with anomalies. And as previously stated as well, the way to get in contact with us is to use the Slack channel chat anomalies, or you can join our working group by sending an email. So next slide. And to finalize, I would like to give a huge thank you to all the contributors and supporters. We absolutely could not have done this without you. And then, yeah, if you have any question right away, we will have a breakout room to further discuss.
Excellent. Thank you for the work there. Giving you a shout out as well. I noticed you've got the fancy black badge, the FinOps professional badge, which is very rare. And then Angel's also a FinOps ambassador, yet another, the purple badge. So he's out there helping spread the message in the community. And this has been a great resource at a lot of these events. So thank you for all the work as well. JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to finops.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.